Hi everybody, and welcome back to this Wednesday series, What's It About? This is where we look at different aspects of our faith, our religion, spirituality, culture, and how they all connect back to being a Christian and drawing us closer in relationship to God. We are coming up on spooky season. Next week is Halloween, and this week we're celebrating All Saints' Day in church. So I wanted to talk just a little bit about what are those things, what are those holidays that we don't really consider religious holidays anymore, but started out very much as religious holidays. And then I also want to talk a little bit about superstitions and how they play into this. One of our great church people here at Grace UMC in Denver, John Dillavou, wrote a sermon a few years ago that sort of tied all of this together: Halloween, All Saints, All Souls, trick-or-treating, superstitions, tied all of this together into one piece. So the superstitions that I'm going to talk about today have been thought through and researched by John Dillavou. So thank you, John, for your work, and I'm excited to be able to share that with you all today. So this weekend coming up, we have a set of sort of 3 religious days, kind of back to back to back, that point us to a particular aspect of our Christian faith. And that's hope in the resurrection and the grief that we feel when we lose people we love. So I want to talk about those 3 days today and sort of see if we can situate the religious understanding of Halloween back into the church work. So we start with the one I think we all know, which would be October 31st, Halloween, which is just our modern English derivative of All Hallows Eve. Hallow, think about the Lord's Prayer, hallowed be thy name. Hallowed means sacred or holy or special. So this is a holy evening. We particularly call this day an eve because the day itself, the 31st, isn't anything significant to the life of the Christian church. But that evening time, which we look toward the next day, that's what we do in evening services, really. We kind of look toward the next day. We're looking toward the 1st of November. So we have an All Hallows Eve, or a sacred evening, a Halloween, if you will, into November the 1st. The church has long celebrated November the 1st as All Saints' Day. This is the day when we remember and we celebrate the lives of those who have died, those Christian influences on our life, who have died and moved on to the next chapter with Jesus. And we look at what they taught us, what we learned from them, how we grew closer to God ourselves, and what the memory of those blessed saints in our lives have to teach us. So we celebrate. This year, we're going to do All Saints' Day on Sunday, October the 30th. It's normally a Tuesday, the 1st, but this year it's on a Sunday. We're moving it to a Sunday, October 30th. And during that time, churches commonly read the names of members or loved ones in the community who have died the year before, and we certainly will do that. That's November 1st. The 31st is Halloween, or All Hallows Eve. November 1st is All Saints' Day, remembering the Christian influences in our lives who have died. And then November 2nd is commonly called All Souls' Day, or sometimes called Remembrance of the Faithful Departed. So All Souls' Day is a day when we do a little bit more of the grieving, right? November 1st focuses on our hope in resurrection as Christians and the message that we're taught through Jesus, that we are resurrected to eternal life with God. But that doesn't account for all of the human emotions that we have with it. So death and grief is hard. And on November 2nd, that's a day committed to sort of general mourning, right? Think about a funeral service for a particular person who died. All Souls is kind of like a general funeral. It's a day when we remember the holes left in our lives by people who have died and moved on. What we do in modern Christianity is kind of smush all of those together, in our Methodist expression at least, smush all of those together into one day. So Halloween, we don't do a whole lot. That's pretty secularized nowadays. We'll talk about that in just a moment. November 1st, which is All Saints, what we normally do is kind of combine All Saints and All Souls into one. So in our church here at Grace, we'll read the names of our church members and community members who have passed away, celebrating the life that they led and what they taught us as Christians, but also living in that mournful space, that grieving space, acknowledging that loss is hard. No matter the promise we have, at the other side, death and loss is always painful for us. So that's kind of what we do. We smush those three holidays together: the eve of All Hallows Eve, Halloween, All Saints' Day, and then All Souls' Day right after. John did some good work on superstitions. So I'm going to read you some excerpts from the sermon that John wrote that teach us some things about Halloween or spooky superstitions. I didn't know a lot of these, so I hope that they're important to you. So along the way, as Halloween developed, some superstitions and traditions have crept in to what was once a very religious holiday. We still observe a lot of these superstitions without even thinking to them, and most of us probably don't even know why. So like I said, on All Hallows Eve, or Halloween, observances that were held to remember the saints who have died, or Christians, were part of the community during the last year. But along with this Christian idea, some other secular ideas kind of worked their way in. For one, it's said that on All Hallows Eve, the souls of the dead would rise from their graves and would visit their earthly homes. This was the beginning of the ghosts in the night on Halloween, or All Hallows Eve. We see this tradition especially in Mexico, and the Day of the Dead, the idea that the spirits can come back and dwell, around and with the people who knew them and honored them. In Europe, it was believed that there were elves and fairies and witches who roamed around on All Hallows Eve. And by the way, witches often presented as cats. So there's kind of a tie-in of our history with cats and Halloween. Here's some more superstitions that come to us. The idea of a costume, right? We all dress up on Halloween. Well, that came from early religious festivals when sacrifices were a part of sort of this fall, autumn, pagan, and other polytheistic expressions. Sacrifices were important. So people often wore skins or the heads of the animals that were to be sacrificed. Later in Ireland, people went from door to door wearing long white robes with the heads of animals begging for food. This idea of trick or treat kind of morphed and evolved throughout the British Isles, but especially in England. On All Hallows Eve, or Halloween, October 31st, wealthy people would sit around the fire eating apples or nuts, basically having a party. And the poor of the community would go a-souling, S-O-U-L, a-souling, meaning they would go from door to door begging for food. The rich people in houses would often give them a pastry, sometimes called a soul cake. You've probably seen those in history things. It was later called trick or treat, though, because in return, the wealthier people would give those seeking food the soul cake. But in return, the people getting food would then promise to pray for the souls of the dead in the wealthy family. So there was kind of an exchange for trick or treats. When that came to America, though, in the 1800s, the idea of the prayers for the dead was forgotten, but the idea of begging for treats is still going strong. Another interesting superstition is the number 13. The number 13 has been unlucky for centuries. You see, legend says that it goes back to Norse mythology. There was a banquet given for all the gods, except for one, Loki, because he was a troublemaker. John says he was a real stinker. No one liked having him around, so he wasn't sent an invitation. Well, Loki heard that there was a party, and he wasn't invited to it, so he simply crashed it. In the midst of all the confusion that followed, though, a different god, a very well-loved god, was killed. So Loki was the 13th guest of the party. So since then, the number 13 has culturally been considered unlucky. We see that in other different traditions as well, but the Norse tradition is kind of where we get the root of that unluckiness. What about breaking a mirror? Have you ever broken a mirror and thought, oh, this is bad luck? Well, tradition says, or superstition says, that you'll have 7 years of bad luck. You see, in earlier times, it was thought that a person's image, or their soul, was captured in a mirror. So if the mirror was broken or shattered, then your image was also shattered. And in different traditions, the image or your soul could escape the mirror, it could be trapped in the mirror. There were all kinds of things. The point is, don't break a mirror. You'll have bad luck. 2 more here. Knocking on wood. We've all thought about that, right? Knocking on wood. This action supposedly gives us just a little extra luck, right? Why is that? Well, this action goes back to ancient folklore. that believed that trees were the home of gods. So gods lived in trees. So to knock on a tree or knock on wood was a way of waking the gods up and asking them for a little extra help. The last one I want us to look at is walking under a ladder. Walking under a ladder is something that most of us probably don't do because since childhood we've been told that it's bad luck. But it has nothing to do with the physics of the ladder. Gravity is not going to make it fall on you. No. When a ladder is propped up against a building, it forms a triangle between the ladder, the building or wall, and the ground. This triangle is thought to be sacred. Triangles have long represented the Holy Trinity in Christian faith, the Father, or the Creator, the Maker, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. So to walk underneath a ladder was considered a way to sort of break that Trinity or break that connection between the two. Sometimes it's thought of that the ground you walk made by a ladder is holy ground, and to walk on holy ground without proper preparation is kind of insulting to God. So it became known that if you walked under a ladder, bad luck. I hope that this has been interesting to learn just a little bit more about some of our Halloween and spooky season superstitions. Thank you, John Dillavou, for your hard work finding out about these superstitions. And I hope you all have a wonderfully safe and exciting, fun-filled Halloween. Get some good candy. And then join whatever church is around you as they go through All Saints. And we remember the people who have died in our lives. Have a great week, friends, and a great Halloween. And I will see you soon. Take care.